Ashtotara Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtotara Shata Shri Srimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter number 1, text number 35. Api swit anye cha. Did you cover this one yesterday?
No. Same first word.
Nija Atma Daivam Ananya Vritya Samanuvrataha Ye Hridika Satya Atmaja Charudeshna Gada Adayah Swasti Charanti Saumya Api Swiranye Nijatma Daivam Api Swiranye Nijatma Daivam Ananya Vritya Samanuvrataye Ananya Vritya Samanuvrataye Hridika Satyatmaja Charudeshna Hridika Satyatmaja Charudeshna Gadadaya Swasti Charanti Saumya Gadadaya Swasti Charanti Saumya Abhisviranye Chanijatma Daivam Ananya Vritya Samanuvrataye Hridika Satyatmaja Charudeshna Gadadaya Swasti Charanti Saumya Abhisviranye Chanijatma Daivam Ananya Vritya Samanuvrataye Hridika Satyatmaja Charudeshna Gadadaya Swasti Charanti Saumya Abhisviranye Chanijatma Daivam Ananya Vritya Samanuvrataye Hridika Satyatmaja Charudeshna Gadadaya Swasti Charanti Saumya Abhisviranye Chanijatma Daivam Ananya Vritya Samanuvrataye Hridika Satyatmaja Charudeshna Gadadaya Swasti Charanti Saumya Abhisviranye Chanijatma Daivam Ananya Vritya Samanuvrataye Hridika Satyatmaja Charudeshna Gadadaya Swasti Charanti Saumya Hridika Satyatmaja Charudeshna Gadadaya Swasti Charanti Saumya. Abhi, as also, Swit, whether, Anye, others, Cha, and, Nija Atma, of one's own self, Daivam, Sri Krishna, Ananya, absolutely, Pritya, faith, Samanuvrataha, followers, Ye, all those who, Hridika, Satya Atmaja, the son of Satyabhama, Charudeshna, Gada, Adayaha, and others, Swasti, all well, Charanti, pastime, Saumya, O sober one. Translation by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. O sober one, others such as Hridika, Charudeshna, Gada, and the son of Satyabhama, who accept Lord Sri Krishna as the soul of the self and thus follow his path without deviation, are they well? So Srila Prabhupada didn't comment on this verse, but there is a very familiar name, at least for devotees here at Krishna Life, Charudeshna, who was a Prabhupada disciple who opened up the book distribution in the Atlanta airport. And yeah, anyways, we've had a lot of classes which mention him and his glories and everything, but Charudeshna Prabhu Ki Jai. I'll just chant the next verse and then read the purport. Apiswadurpyam vijayachyutabhyam dharmena dharma paripati setum duryodhano tapyatadyat sabhayam samrajya lakshmiya vijayanu Translation. Also let me inquire whether Maharaj Yudhishthir is now maintaining the kingdom according to religious principles and with respect for the path of religion. Formerly, Duryodhana was burning with envy because Yudhishthir was being protected by the arms of Krishna and Arjuna as if they were his own arms. Purport. Maharaj Yudhishthir was the emblem of religion. When he was ruling his kingdom with the help of Lord Krishna and Arjuna, the opulence of his kingdom surpassed all imaginations of the opulence of the kingdom of heaven. His actual arms were Lord Krishna and Arjuna, and thus he surpassed everyone's opulence. Duryodhana, being envious of this opulence, planned so many schemes to put Yudhishthir into difficulty, and at last the battle of Kurukshetra was brought about. After the battle of Kurukshetra, Maharaj Yudhishthir was again able to rule his legitimate kingdom, and he reinstated the principles of honor and respect for religion. That is the beauty of a kingdom ruled by a pious king like Maharaj Yudhishthir. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Taparakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitangscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvi Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivikasa Swami Nitinamane Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitinamane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'll read the translation again. Also, let me inquire whether Maharaj Yudhishthira is now maintaining the kingdom according to religious principles and with respect for the path of religion. Formerly, Duryodhana was burning with envy because Yudhishthira was being protected by the arms of Krishna and Arjuna as if they were his own arms. So, obviously we've been discussing different associates of Lord Krishna in this series of verses, and as Maharaj has said a couple of times, that discussing the devotees of Lord Krishna is not different than discussing about Krishna. He exists in his name, form, pastimes, paraphernalia, associates like this, and this is how he manifests his pastimes in this world. And you'll see that most of the literature which is relevant to Vaishnavas is actually more to do with devotees than with the Supreme Lord himself. But of course, you know, the devotees are always in relationship with the Lord, and therefore we can derive great benefit from that. So we're moving from a discussion of Lord Krishna's sons, where it's specifically mentioned Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and pretty sure in this last verse, text number 35, Hridika, Charudeshna, Gada, the son of Satyava. I think these are all also Krishna's sons. Krishna also, he had an older brother named Gada, right? Younger brother. Younger brother. I mean, is his name Gada? I think it was Gada. But he must also have a son, because all these other personalities are Krishna's sons. But in text number 36, which is the topic of discussion today, we're moving into a discussion on the Pandavas. The subsequent verses will be about the specific Pandavas. There's 5 Pandavas. You have Yudhishthira, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva. And these personalities are thoroughly discussed in the Mahabharata, and also in Prabhupada's books, mainly in the first canto, where in Prabhupada's purports he writes a lot that has to do with the Mahabharata. A lot of the pastimes from the Mahabharata are recorded there. But a lot of devotees probably haven't read the Mahabharata. Have you read the Mahabharata? Mijalan Prabhu, have you read? Some. It's like Prabhupada had a desire that the Mahabharata, he himself wanted to translate the Mahabharata and publish it for devotees to read and benefit from that, but obviously he was crunched on time. He did so much already, but his desire was that the Mahabharata would be translated in the same format that the Srimad Bhagavatam is translated, which is a huge endeavor. The Bhagavatam is 18,000 shlokas. The Ramayana, which is in progress right now by some devotees, is 21,000 shlokas, but the Mahabharata is like huge. It's I think over 100,000 shlokas. So it's a huge thing, but it's a very important thing actually. And in Madhvacharya's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada writes in one place that in Madhvacharya's commentary in the Bhagavad Gita, the Tatparya Nirnaya, that part of his goal in writing that commentary in the Bhagavad Gita was establishing the Mahabharata as a crucial literature for Vaishnavas. And many people think that it's just a storybook, and since in modern history it's been used as plots for entertainment, TV series, and children's cartoons. We were talking about Little Krishna and Chota Bheem, and these. I mean, obviously it's better than SpongeBob and everything like that, but it's usually included with a lot of misrepresentations and misinterpretations of the Shastra. And it also, generally the mood in the modern day is that the people don't give so much respect to the Mahabharata. Even like caste brahmanas, smarta brahmanas and stuff like that, they give lots of emphasis on like Shruti, the Veda, reciting the Vedas and everything, but Mahabharata and like these itihasas, Puranas and everything, this is for like Shudras and like lower class people, less intelligent people, which is true, but we should also remember that everyone in Kali Yuga is born as a Shudra, so therefore these things are very important for us to understand and for us to hear about and everything like that, and we can become purified by hearing the pastimes of the Mahabharata. It is a lot of stories, but as Madhvacharya is saying that this is a crucial text for Vaishnavas. Although there's a lot of stories in there, it's intertwined with the pastimes of the Supreme Lord and his devotees, and also a tremendous amount of philosophy, and also rules and regulations are given in texts like the Mahabharata. the biggest portion of the Mahabharata, called the Shanti Parva, within that portion, the biggest section of that is a very famous conversation wherein the Vishnu Sahasranam is also part of this, but Bhishma Dev's instructions to Yudhishthira on how to rule the planet. And in this section of the Mahabharata, there's like a tremendous amount of knowledge and a tremendous amount of instructions on Dharma. And in this verse today, Yudhishthira is referred. You don't see in the verse in the Sanskrit text at all the name Yudhishthira. His name in the text is Dharma, and Yudhishthira is also known as Dharmaraj. And actually, the Mahabharata is a great work about Yudhishthira. It's about the Pandavas, but Yudhishthira is the head of the Pandavas. He's the most senior of them. He's the leader of the Pandavas. And ultimately, the Mahabharata is a great story about how the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna established Yudhishthira on the throne to rule the world. And this is a huge story, and it's really, really complicated. The Ramayana is nowhere near as complicated compared to the Mahabharata. There are some like tangential stories that kind of go with the Ramayana, you know, the whole like story of how the Ganga came and et cetera, But the general storyline is followed pretty clearly in the Ramayana. But the Mahabharata is like, it's ridiculous. The abridged version by Krishna Dharma Prabhu is from what I've heard, I haven't read any non-abridged version of the Mahabharata. I don't know if anybody, can say that they have read a non-abridged version of the Mahabharata. He has? So, but most people are reading abridged versions. I think the Gita Press, they have an abridged version, which is the most popular, but now we have Purna Pragya Prabhu and Krishna Dharma Prabhu. They also have presentations of the Mahabharata. But these are heavily abridged. They're yes, Prabhu.
I believe there was one by Kamala Subramanian that Prabhupada said was not bad.
Oh, I see.
You heard the name?
I've heard the name, but I don't know anything about it. So yeah, for thousands of years, the Mahabharata has been passed through generations and published in various ways in different languages, and according to the local languages in different parts of India, they have different versions of the Mahabharata, similar to the Ramayana. But because it's such a big work, it's usually abridged and it's simplified, and it's already supposed to be a very simple to understand literature. It's for Shudras, women, et cetera, lower born people to understand. But the point that I was saying is that the Mahabharata is about Yudhishthira, actually. Yudhishthira is a very, very important personality. If you look up Yudhishthira on the database, you'll just get like a whole laundry list of all the times that Prabhupada has mentioned Yudhishthira, because he is very intimately related with Krishna, and of course that's why he is so famous, and that's why he is remembered by devotees. But the Mahabharata records all of these things, and it's really nice if devotees can hear about these things. And so for most people who haven't read the Mahabharata, I was fortunate enough, Vishnu Chitta Prabhu, he asked me to read the Mahabharata, and because it's so much, I don't remember so much, but I'll try to remember something, and I'll consider this to be like a little introduction to the Pandavas, because we're going to be getting a little more deeper into the Pandavas in the next few verses. But it's obviously with Vedic stories, it gets really complex because we have the principles of like karma and like previous lives and curses and all these things. They become intertwined, and it becomes a very big drama, And it's like for somebody who's able to get really absorbed in it, it's actually really, really amazing. The propensity to kind of like stick your nose in people's drama is fully satisfied by reading things like the Mahabharata, because it's just full of drama, and there's like so many things where you like raise your eyebrows, like, oh, like wow, that's some tea. They call it tea, I guess now. So yeah, they spill all the tea in the Mahabharata. There's like everybody's like past lives are revealed, and then but yeah, this fully dovetails the propensity to gossip and hear about family relations and worldly things. It dovetails it in the service of Krishna, because ultimately the Mahabharata, although it seems like it's talking about a bunch of worldly things like kings and families and dynasties and everything like that, it ultimately brings one to the conclusion of understanding that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And of course, yes, Prabhu.
The Supreme Soap Opera, right?
Supreme soap opera, yeah. And they've tried to make soap operas out of the Mahabharata, but because they are editing out the portion which shows how the Supreme Lord is behind all of this, then, you know, it's not so important. And of course, they add so many different things. You were telling me that there's a lot of feminist elements in the new Mahabharata series that they just released in the past few years. Anyways, you know, we can, thankfully, this Mahabharata is still being presented by devotees, and we're still able to hear about these pastimes. So we should hear about these pastimes, especially after reading Prabhupada's books at least one time through, you know, having a good understanding of philosophy and everything. It can really get one deeper into Krishna consciousness. You know, I remember the first time I read Bhagavad Gita, there's so many names in the first chapter. I just got so discouraged that I just would like call like Dhritarashtra like D, and I would call like Duryodhana like, I guess, I don't know what I would call him, but you know, you have to like, you know, I just got tired of even like saying their names. I don't know anything about them, you know, and that's okay. The first time you're going through Bhagavad Gita, I've even heard Matsya Prabhu recommend, you know, people to just skip the first chapter, which I don't, anyways. But you know, but gradually as you get deeper and deeper into Krishna consciousness, you should know about these people. They're very, very important people. I mean, the Bhagavad Gita is considered to be the essence of the Vedas, and anything mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita is crucial to know. I mean, the minimum a devotee should know is Bhagavad Gita, what to speak of all the pastimes in Bhagavatam, and going on to Mahabharata and everything like that. And it's a lot, and for devotees who are inspired, they can get really, really into it. But anyways, I didn't really prepare so much. I should have prepared so much for this class on Yudhishthira, but I didn't prepare so much, so I'll try to remember as much as I can from going through the Mahabharata. So the story of the Pandavas and the story of Maharaj Yudhishthira, it goes back multiple generations. I mean, to understand the whole situation of what was going on in the world whenever the Pandavas were kind of in conflict with the Kauravas, you have to go back like several generations. This is like a long-standing, actually it wasn't really a long-standing rivalry between these two factions, but it sprung about because of a few different factors which kind of were brewing in the background. And a good place to like start is the instance of Satyavati, the mother of Vyasadeva, is how she's most famously remembered. She is the daughter of a Apsara who was cursed to become a fish. And so this fish was swimming in the Ganga, and then by chance the semen of a king fell into the water, and the fish swallowed it and became pregnant with twin babies. And then some fisher people, they caught that fish. Whenever they were cutting it open, there's two beautiful babies here. And good citizens, of course, knowing that all of the living entities within the jurisdiction of the king ultimately belong to the king, the Praja. The first thing that they think is that, okay, these children must belong to the king. They don't, we didn't beget these children. These are rightfully the king. So they presented these children to the king. Also, they were born in a miraculous nature, which, the king should be offered all of the best things. So these children were obviously very special.
They were human children.
Sorry?
They were human children.
Yeah, they're human children born inside of a fish. And similar to the story of Pradyumna, but not so much. Pradyumna was swallowed by a fish, but these children were born by a fish, and the mother was the fish. But they were very beautiful because the mother was actually an Apsara, and they were begotten by the king, which a king is usually very beautiful. But anyways, without getting into too much detail, because there's a lot to cover in this, and this is the very beginning. So there was a boy and a girl. The boy was known as Matsya because he was born of a fish, and he was offered to the king. That boy later, you might have heard of the Matsya dynasty. It's mentioned a lot in Prabhupada's books, and especially in Krishna book. He later became the king of the Matsya dynasty. He was given that as his zone by his father. And King Virata in the Mahabharata, and also mentioned in the Bhagavatam, in his capital city, that is where the Pandavas were incognito for 1 year. So that's some connection there. But more importantly, the daughter, the girl that came from this fish, was known as Matsya Gandhi, which means that she smelled like a fish. Gandha means fragrance. So Matsya Gandhi means one who smells like a fish. And she kind of carried this aroma, even as she was growing up, she was just known as Matsya Gandhi. And of course this isn't and anyways, they tried to give her to the king, and the king refused. Why don't you take care of her? I think I'm good, I'll take the son, he's strong. She smells like a fish, you know, and like the women in the royal order are more or less almost assets to that royal order. And you'll see that generally, especially when they're young, they're almost I don't know how to say this in a good way, but in the best way that I can say it, they're almost as if the property of the father, of the king. And they're kind of used in diplomatic affairs. They're kind of like, you know, you marry off your daughter to one king who you want to have a good relationship with, or you hold like a swayamvara, and then, you know, in this way you gain a lot of reputation from a lot of great kings fighting over your daughter, and, you know, etc., etc. Seeing that this daughter might not be so attractive to men because of her fragrance, I think, anyways, he probably just like, you know, he let the villagers, the fishermen take care of her, and as she grew up, she became known as Satyavati because she was very truthful. That's explained somewhere. But and she was engaged in the occupation of letting people cross over the river in her boat, and she was like a boat lady. And she was very beautiful, but she smelled like a fish. One day, Parashara Muni was attracted by her, and she was letting him cross the river on her boat. He became very, very attracted to her, and then he, through his mystic powers, he created a great fog of musk. And musk is like, does anybody know what musk is? I had to look it up because I've heard it a lot, and I know it's like something that's supposed to smell good, but
I think it's like a scent comes from like this deer.
yeah, it comes from like a scent gland from a deer, and it's like a aphrodisiac. Like the deers use it to attract mates, and also it smells nice for like humans too, I guess. So they, even today, they put it in perfumes. I don't know if they put the real thing in perfumes, but at least some kind of imitation of the smell of musk. They still put it in perfumes today. But Parashara Muni on the boat with Satyavati, he creates a fog, a cloud of fog around her that smelled like musk. And in this fog, so that nobody could see, he rapes her. And this is like a premarital, you know, thing. I don't know if she was consenting. Anyways, in Vedic culture, there's no such thing as sex outside of marriage, so we can consider this was a rape. And she became pregnant, and she had a son named, what's his name? Vedavyas. What's his other name? Dvaipayana, Krishna Dvaipayana Vyas. This was the son of Parashara, and also because of this fog of musk smell, she became known as Kasturi Gandha, which you know, from Matsya Gandha to Kasturi Gandha, which means one who smells like musk, and she smelled very nice after that, actually. And later on, a great king by the name of Shantanu, he happened to come across her, and he was so attracted by her beauty and her smell that he just had to marry her. And he petitioned to the village people, you know, even though he's a great king, he just had to have her. They're like, okay, you can marry her, but you have to promise us that her children will become the rulers after you. They'll be the heir apparent after you. And already, Shantanu had a son. His son was Bhishma Dev, and he had a wife named, she was Ganga. She was the same personality as the river. And from Ganga, he begat Bhishma. That's
at that point.
Sorry?
Devavrata.
Yeah, Devavrata. Well, yeah, he eventually made a vow to. Anyways, I'll talk about that a little bit later. But Shantanu and anyways. I wasn't planning on talking about this, but this is how the Mahabharata actually works. It's like you start talking about something, then something comes up, and you have to explain it before you can go on to the next thing, and by the end of it, you forget what you were even talking about in the beginning, but it all comes out to be Krishna Bhakti, you know, so it's all nice. But so Ganga and Shantanu, they were married under one condition. Ganga told him that anything I do, you can't criticize. Whatever I do, you can't say a thing. The moment that you disagree with something that I do and say something about it, I'm out of here, and that's it. So she started having children. They started having children, and immediately she would just throw them in the river and kill them. And like, you know, he's like, oh my God, like what's going on? You know, I'm a king and I need sons to take over the kingdom, and she's killing every single child that's coming out. You know, like how can I tolerate this? He tolerated it, I think, 7 times because all of her sons were the Vasus. So one by one, she killed the different sons that were being born. And then finally, the last one, who was Bhishma, he just couldn't tolerate it. What are you doing, lady? I need to have a son. And then she's like, that's it. I told you. So then she left. But he was left with this nice boy, Bhishma, and who was a very great personality, completely qualified to become the heir apparent to Shantanu. But this Shantanu also, he later fell in love with Satyavati, and they made a condition that if you marry her, her sons need to become the king. Whatever her most senior son, he needs to become the king. So hearing this, Bhishma, to please his father, he took a vow of celibacy because that disqualified him from becoming a king. King has to get married and have children to continue the dynasty and everything like that. So in order to please his father by fulfilling his promise, Bhishma disqualifies himself to become the king, even though he was completely qualified. And because of this vow of Naishtika Brahmacharya, he became known as Devavrata. And also Bhishma is a name which means that vow was just so terrible. The demigods seeing that were just like, oh my gosh, how could he do that? How could he do such a thing? It's such an intense vow, especially for somebody like him in the royal order and everything. For a Brahmana, it's not, it is a big thing for a Brahmana, but it's not expected at all from a Kshatriya. But anyways, Shantanu and Satyavati get married, but very soon after Shantanu, he dies before he could beget any sons from Satyavati. And this is a big problem. His only other son is Bhishma, who is not qualified to become the king anymore, and he's not willing to break his vow. So, what to do? And traditionally, not in Kali Yuga, specifically mentioned not in Kali Yuga, but previously, what you could do is actually have one of the brothers of the king, or someone on that level, beget a child in the womb of his wife, and that would be considered to be his son. So even though he was departed, and they were thinking, who can beget, then they remembered, oh, Satyavati has this son Vyas, and so it's his half brother. So the half brother Vyas was qualified to beget children in the womb of, where are we? Satyavati and Shantanu. So Satyavati and Shantanu, they have two children. So they have two children. I got mixed up. They have two children, one named Vichitra Virya and one named, what's that one they got in a fight with the Gandharva? Do you remember? Vichitra Virya, what is it? Chitra, there's something, Chitra. Hold on, I wrote it down somewhere.
Gandharva king named Chitraratha, and he got fried out that he had the same name. Chitrangara. So so he had two sons. The first son, Chitravirya, right? Chitravirya, Vichitravirya. He was kind of weak and he wasn't really very healthy and everything like that. He was the elder son, but he got married. He got married to two women, I think maybe just two, Ambika and Balika. But before he could beget sons in them, he died. But what can happen is that his brother can kind of take over the throne, and then his sons would kind of take over the whole thing like that. So, but Chitrangara, he basically got attacked out of nowhere by this Gandharva just because he had the same name as him, and he's like, no, I'm the only Chitrangara, I can't, I'm the sheriff in town, type of thing. So he wasn't going to tolerate that. He killed Chitrangara. So then Vichitra Virya's wives are left with no sons, and this is becoming a recurring problem, But then they remember, actually, the brother of Vichitra Virya, the half brother of Vichitra Virya, Krishna Dvaipayana Vyas, he is there who can beget children in the wombs of his wives, and so he had two different wives, and I think he had three wives. Yeah. So you have Ambika, Ambalika, and then I think Ambalini, something like that. And then so it was arranged, and they didn't have any say in the matter. It was their duty to beget children for the dynasty. But whenever Ved Vyas showed up, they were not into it at all. And keep in mind, Ved Vyas is an ascetic. He's a rishi. He's in the mountains. He's got matted hair. He's covered in he's very dirty. He's just super, super ugly. And they're just not into it at all. They're like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? So first of all, Balika, Ambika is the first one. She unifies with Vedavyas. Actually, I guess the first one would be Ambalika, because Pandu is senior to Dhritarashtra. And but she, seeing Vedavyas, she becomes weak and pale just by looking at him. And because she became weak and pale in the process of intercourse, the son became weak and pale, who was known as Pandu. And the word Pandu means pale. And the second wife, Ambalika, she didn't even want to see him, so she covered her eyes during the sexual intercourse, so her child became blind, and that was Dhritarashtra. And then the third wife didn't even want to do it after hearing, like how horrible it was with the other two wives.
I think the third wife was a maidservant. She wasn't.
Well, she switched it out. She was she got one of her maidservants to be like, hey, I'm not going to do this. You go in there and pretend to be me because, I'm not into it at all. So she gets one of her maidservants to go in there, some Shudrani, and then from the Shudrani in Vedavyas comes Vidura. And this is a whole other story too, why Vidura, who is an incarnation of Yamaraj, was forced to take a birth as a Shudra. That's also described in Prabhupada's books. I won't get into that. But so now we have, anyways, I can briefly say it. So basically, there was a king. He when he was a kid, he would stab insects with pieces of reeds or something, like grass or something. He would kill insects by doing that. And then whenever he was a very pious king. He lived his life according to Dharma the whole time, except for that thing when he was a kid. Whenever he died, the Yamadutas came and took him to Yamaraj, and then Yamaraj punished him for what do they call that? Impaling. Yeah, impaling. For impaling these bugs, and now you have to take some birds and get impaled. And then he's like, what the heck is this? I was a kid, and I guess there's some injunction that until the age of 14 or something, your karma, your parents are responsible for your karma, basically. And so he's like, what is this? This is not right. So he curses him or one sage or something. He curses Yamaraj that because you have misused your power of punishing people, you have to get born as a Shudra. So that became Vidura. But anyways, so now we have Pandu, Dhritarashtra, and Vidura. And Pandu is the father of the Pandavas. That's why they're called the Pandavas. And he was the heir apparent to Shantanu. And his sons were meant to become the next kings. And he got married to Kunti and Madri. Yeah? And he was living as a very righteous king for some time, and then when he was out hunting one day, he shot what he thought was a deer, but it turned out to be a great rishi who was engaging in sexual intercourse with his wife. And while the rishi is dying, he curses Pandu that he will never be able to enjoy sex again. And the moment that he tries to enjoy sex, he'll die. And so then there's now we have another problem. The heir apparent, he's cursed that he can't have kids, but he has to have kids. But luckily, his wife Kunti, who is the daughter of Shurasena, who is the king of Mathura, the connection. That's why she's Krishna's aunt. When she was a child, living in the palace of Shurasena, Durvasa Muni came there and she served him very nicely. He gave her the benediction that she could invoke any demigod at will and beget children with that demigod when she was just a little kid. And then right after she got this magical mantra where she could do this, she tried it out. She conjured the sun god, and then the sun god came and she's like, oh, never mind, I just wanted to check if it would work. And he's like, well, I'm here and I can't go back without doing my thing, or else I'll get criticized and people will make fun of me that I got rejected by so he basically tells her, okay, I'm gonna have a kid with you, but I'll do it in such a way where you maintain your virginity. And from this, she has a son named Surya Putra Karn, which Matsya Prabhu has taught us that this is a great book line. For some reason, he was calling people Surya Putra Karn, and they really liked it. But anyways, that's unrelated. So the son of Surya Putra Karna, and his name was Karna, and she couldn't take care of him, and she didn't want anybody to know about him, so she put him in the Ganga. He floated away, and then he was taken under the shelter of some charioteer family. And anyways, he became Karna Sutta. Sutta is the charioteer caste. So that was the first son that she had, but nobody really knew about it. Later on, whenever she married Pandu, because he performed this great offense of like killing the rishi while he was engaged in sex and he got cursed, he just decided to give up the kingdom. He passed it over to Dhritarashtra. He said, you take care of all this. I got to go atone for this. This is a big deal. I want to go to the heavenly planets after I die, type of thing. So he went to Himabad, which is like one of the mountains, the Himalayas, and he was there engaged in like austerities, penances. He was serving the rishis there. He was hearing from them and everything like that. And then Kunti was like, hey, actually I have this boon where I can literally like have kids from like the demigods, and they'll be your progeny basically. So then he's like, oh, let's do it. That's like the solution for our problem. So she starts to beget children. Meanwhile, Dhritarashtra, his wife, Gandhari, she is thinking, okay, we're in charge now. Now I need to have kids who can take over the throne and everything like that. And especially if she can have kids before Kunti does, and her kids become a little more legitimate because they're senior and everything like that. So she gets a boon from, I think, Vyasadeva, maybe somebody else. She gets a boon that she can have 100 kids, 100 sons. So who was it? Durvasa Muni, it probably was. She gets a boon to have 100 sons. So she gets pregnant, but then she's pregnant for like years. And she's like, what the heck is this? And then Kunti has this, she has her first son, Yudhishthira, or her second son, but most people think it's her first son. She conjures Dharmaraj, she conjures Yamaraj, and she begets Yudhishthira. And Yudhishthira is also called Dharmaraj, and he is completely invested with this potency to uphold Dharma and to chastise those who are not following Dharma and to establish real Dharma. Anyways, I'll talk about that more later. But hearing that, over in Himavad, that Kunti has this like beautiful child, and everybody was like, he looks like a demigod on earth, and he's like going to be the next king. Hearing about this, she freaked out, and she's like, what is this? I've been pregnant for years. I was supposed to have the first kid, I was supposed to have 100 sons, and then she does like a self-inflicted like miscarriage type of thing, and she gives birth to this lump of like hard flesh. And then Durvasa, or whoever gave the benediction, it probably was Durvasa, he came and he's like, what are you doing? You just had to wait a little longer and then it all would have worked out fine. But anyways, go give me, 100 vats of ghee, and then he like cut it up into 100 pieces, put it in there, and then one by one, you had Duryodhana and then all of his 99 other brothers. They're named in the Mahabharata, but it's like a lot, I don't remember. There was a few, Ashwatthama, and I only remember a couple. But but this happens the same. This is actually an important thing. It's not that well. Yeah, it's very important. But the day that Duryodhana was born was the same exact day that Bhima was born, which was Kunti's second son in this batch. And Bhima was born from Vayu. Vayu came and Bhima was then born. He was very powerful, just like Vayu. The wind is like very powerful. The whole body is only able to move and operate because of Vayu, the air like within the body, and all things powerful. Ultimately, like Vayu is behind that. So Bhima was also very, very powerful. He was begotten on the same day that Duryodhana was born. So they were completely equal in terms of birth, or at least the time of birth. They were completely equal. Later on, you have she conjured Indra, where Indra came and begot Arjuna. And then at this time, Madri was like, Madri, who was actually the senior wife of Pandu, she's like, what the heck is this? Like by birth and by marriage, I'm senior to Kunti. Like why is she having all the kids? She's gonna get all the glory because her kids are gonna be the ones that assume the throne. I want to have some kids too. So then Kunti, feeling compassionate towards her, she's like, okay, I'll tell you this mantra. You can have one demigod come, but you can only do it one time. But she was clever enough so that she conjured the Ashwini Kumaras, which are they're twin brothers. They're like basically like the same person, but they're two people. And she conjures both of them, and she begets two sons, twins, Nakula and Sahadeva. So those are sons of Madri. And but anyways, now that they're sons, they were being raised in the Himalayas under the guidance of rishis. They were hearing from rishis. They were being trained by rishis from a young age. It's a very important thing that a lot of people kind of disregard about the Pandavas, is that they grew up in their initial years in life in the association of great rishis and sages, and in a setting of renunciation, and like they were like yogis basically. They were like, they grew up like that. And but then, in the changing seasons, the flowers came and everything became fragrant, and then Pandu became super, super lusty, and he just couldn't hold back. He tried to have sex with Madri and then just died on the spot. But at least now there was some children. They were, and Kunti was left, but Madri ended up throwing herself in the fire at Pandu's, whatever it's called.
Collapse.
No, whenever they incinerate the body. What is it? Satya. Some whatever it is. But she threw herself in the fire. So then it was just Kunti and her 5 sons, or well, 2 of the sons were Madri's, but she was taking care of them and everything. And they were also being taken care of these rishis. And the rishis, they decide that the best thing is for these boys to go back to Hastinapur, the capital city of the Kurus, so that they can get trained up as being kings, and then they can assume the throne and everything. Keep in mind, this is all Krishna's arrangement. It's a very elaborate plan to reestablish Dharma in this world, especially at a time when the earth was overburdened with sinful kings all over the earth, and this was Krishna's plan. It went back many generations. Finally, it was kind of coming to plan. These boys were lined up to be the heir apparent for Pandu, but of course, we all know the story how Duryodhana was not into it at all. Dhritarashtra was also easily swayed by Duryodhana's assertion that he was going to be next and everything like that. But yeah, basically they were raised in Hastinapur for many years. They were under the training of great personalities like Bhishma, Vidura, Kripacharya, Dronacharya. These were kind of the great personalities. Dhritarashtra himself. They were raising these boys to become the most powerful and influential leaders of society, and they were getting the best of everything, being in the royal order and everything like that. And very early on, Duryodhana was super, super envious of all of them, and especially so Yudhishthir, being Dharmaraj himself, he was very righteous and very humble and very, sober in his dealings with everyone. He didn't really pick so much of a fight with Duryodhana. His name is also Ajata Shatru, which means that there was never anyone who was born who was an enemy of Yudhishthir. He considered that nobody was his enemy. He was always trying to have cordial relationships with everyone. Bhima was not like that at all. And he had a thing with Duryodhana from the very beginning. He would, he would outperform him in their classes, studying the weapons and everything like that. Whenever they were playing in the river, Bhima would swim underwater and grab Duryodhana and try to he would pretend like he was going to drown him, and then let him come up right at the last second. So Duryodhana was being humiliated from the very beginning. And of course, he is considering himself to be the heir apparent, and he's also considering himself to be equal to and superior to the Pandavas. And this became a big problem, because the Pandavas were in one sense they were living like royalty, but in another sense there was this opposing element from day one, where they were not given the facility to exercise their power, especially when they started to grow up. They established the city Indraprastha, which was separate from Hastinapur, and they were ruling from there for some time. They became very, very opulent, and their assembly hall was constructed by Mayadanava, which was way better than any building in Hastinapur, and Duryodhana was completely envious of that, and everything, they were just better in every single way than Duryodhana. Yes.
Was that before they were exiled to Indraprastha, or was that after they were exiled? I'm trying to kind of get...
It seems like, I'm not sure if it was Indraprastha, but definitely they had a bunch of opulence, and they had even married Draupadi by that time, which means that they were pretty well established, and it seems like they were ruling Indraprastha.
Well, that's in the purport it's described. Yudhishthira was ruling, Krishna and Arjuna were like his...
Right.
And and they had all sorts of opulence. So,
Right.
I mean, it had to be obviously before the Battle of Kurukshetra. But when exactly was that? Because remember, they were exiled for 12 years, and then they had.
Yeah. Well, it must have been before the exile, because if you remember the whole way that they lost everything and their wife got humiliated in front of everybody was that they gambled away everything, and they had a lot. If you read in the Mahabharata, the amount that they lost in this gambling match is ridiculous. And like reading it, you're just like, no, like what, why? But Yudhishthira, I mean, you'd think that somebody like Yudhishthira would not gamble away all of his possessions, but being a Kshatriya and being challenged by another Kshatriya, he had to do it. He would be considered a coward if he wasn't willing to fight with somebody in this way. But Duryodhana was a big like rascal, a big like cheat. He had a minister named Shakuni who was evil guy, and he was really, really expert in this throwing the dice. He knew some very specific technique where he could throw them in such a way where he could always like get the numbers that he wanted. And Yudhishthira just wasn't trained like that. He didn't know how to play. He didn't, he wasn't expert in this way, and they lost everything, one by match after match. First, they lose some money, then they lose their weapons, then they lose their kingdom, and then at last they lose they have to become slaves to the Kurus, and their wife has to become a maidservant in the Kuru's royal house. And this was completely humiliating for the Pandavas. It was a really big loss because they had everything, and they were better in every single way than Duryodhana and all of his brothers, and they were they had everything. And they lost it all in this gambling match. Draupadi was disrobed in the assembly of all the Kurus, and ultimately because they already lost everything, he decided to play one more time, and then from this they were completely exiled from like the kingdom. And Duryodhana was thinking, oh yeah, now I got it in the bag. They don't have a single thing. They're not even allowed to come into my kingdom. I'm gonna be the ruler. I'm gonna be the next king. I figured it out. I did it. So, anyways, the Pandavas were exiled. Kunti, their mother, was also with them. Draupadi was with them, and they were it's described where they were in different parts, but they were living very austerely. These are royal people. Yes, Prabhu.
How did they manage to take Draupadi with them? Because she said she got lost in the gambling match.
I'm not sure. I was thinking about that. I'm not sure. I'm sure it's mentioned, but yeah, I'm not really sure.
They became slaves. So
yeah,
I forget who chimed in at some point. They said, well, actually, you can't take Draupadi because they were slaves. So because they were slaves, she was no longer their property. Says they didn't have the right to gamble her away.
Oh, I see. Okay, so they already became slaves, and they already lost her as property. They couldn't have had her as property, so okay, thank you. But so they were out living very austerely, and meanwhile Duryodhana he's making all these schemes of trying to kill them while they're out there, so that they couldn't complete the whole thing. He tried to poison them. He tried to burn down this like house that they built for them, and there were so many attempts at their life. There were so many attempts to discredit them, and but somehow or other they made the whole 12 years, and then plus 1 year of living incognito. That's when they were in the Virata kingdom, where anyways, that's a whole other thing. It's kind of funny, their roles that they played in that way. Arjuna, this great warrior, he became like this like transgender like singer, it's like, wait, what? And even while he was doing that, he fought right on the last day of their incognito sentence. He's still dressed like a lady, and he goes out on the chariot and like just like destroys the Kauravas, and like but anyways, they underwent so many difficulties during this time, even though like their karma, literally everything was like laid out for them on like a silver platter, from their very birth. They had everything. They're sons of demigods, they're sons of like the Digvijay of the whole planet at that time, the king who conquered all directions and was like the guy, so like they had everything, and then just like that they had nothing at all. And it's interesting because we're hearing about how all of this opulence that Yudhishthira had, all this opulence and this power and everything, all of that was just taken away from them, and the whole time Bhima is like just like freaking out, like why don't we just go like destroy these people, like we can take them. And Yudhishthira was always having to calm him down. It's like, no, we have to follow our dharma, this is our providence. It's like you know, by providence, we have to go through this. We have to remain level-headed. We have to do our duty. You know, we have to do this. And he was always keeping his brothers from just like going and destroying everybody. And so they did this for many, many years. Finally, they came back, and they were like better than ever. They kind of like reestablished themselves. I think it was at this time whenever Yudhishthir started like, kind of like, he started, actually, I guess the Rajasuya would have been before they, do you know if the Rajasuya sacrifice was before they got exiled? I'm not really sure the whole timeline of all of these things. But anyways, they became a big threat to the Kauravas again, specifically to Duryodhana. And he was, you know, for many, many years he was thinking that he was gonna do all.
Yeah, I got a question.
Yes, please.
How's that possible? Because just before the Battle of Kurukshetra, remember Krishna went like as a peace negotiation, and he was just asking, okay, give him 5 villages, and that's
They
when
wouldn't give a single
yeah,
pin.
I think I heard that from the spiritual master the other day.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
He was saying that they got reestablished, but from that, it doesn't sound like they got reestablished.
Yeah, that's
They
true.
were just begging for 5 villages.
That's true. Anyways, they were out of their exile. They entered back into the kingdom, and they were a threat to Duryodhana. But I think you're right. They weren't able. They didn't have any land to rule. They didn't have anything still. But you know, they were powerful warriors, and this was a big threat for Duryodhana. And in the course, and this is a big section of the Mahabharata, and there's a lot of details. But basically, the world was divided in 2 different like sides. You know, some people like Balaram, even Krishna, they decided not to get directly involved with the whole thing. But even Krishna, he donated a whole entire force of his army, a whole Akshohini or whatever, to the Kauravas. And these warriors were considered to be the greatest of all time. The Narayana, do you remember what they're called? They had like 4 hands and everything. These really powerful warriors. And Krishna, of course, became the charioteer of Arjuna. And in the whole course of this fighting, Bhima, he took a vow to kill all of the different brothers of Duryodhana. And he gradually was doing this. Arjuna took the vow to kill, who was it?
Jayadratha.
Jayadratha, yeah, that came about later. Anyways, all the different Pandavas were like kind of like matched up, and they kind of like they had their enemies, or their apparent enemies, and everything like that. But they and this was a huge political mess, which ended up becoming the Battle of Kurukshetra. And this is kind of like the culmination of like the whole Mahabharata. This is like the turning point of the whole thing. Basically, whoever wins is the one who gets to take over the kingdom. And you know, it's a really, really important thing. Over 64 crores, I think Prabhupada writes in one place, of soldiers were killed in the Battle of Kurukshetra. And 1 crore is what, like
10 million.
10 million. So that's
640.
I thought it was more than that.
No, 640 million.
I mean, hey, that's a lot of people. But the whole Kshatriya race was completely wiped out in the course of this. And then keep in mind, this is all according to Krishna's plan. And this was this reminded me of this quote that you quote a lot, and you would have to say, because I don't remember, but Prabhupada saying that you know, he was coming to America. He didn't know what Krishna was doing, but all along Krishna had a plan where he brought all these boys and girls to come and help him spread Lord Chaitanya's mission and everything like that. So similarly, the Pandavas, specifically Yudhishthira, the leader of the Pandavas, he always maintained his faith that actually Krishna has a plan, and as long as we stick to our duty, then Krishna will come through and he will protect us. He will, everything auspicious will happen if we simply stick to our duty. And this was what he was really, really big on. Dharmaraj, just like sticking to his duty. And this was challenged multiple times. He got into multiple dharma sankats, where it's like a conflict of interest. It's like, okay, I need to follow my dharma, but right now I can't tell what my dharma is. And there's a very famous instance that Prabhupada writes about where Lord Krishna himself tells Yudhishthira to go to Dronacharya and tell him that Ashwatthama is dead. His son is Ashwatthama. Oh, I guess Ashwatthama is not the brother of Duryodhana.
Ashwatthama is the son of Dronacharya.
I said that he was a brother, which is not right. But Krishna told Yudhishthira to go to Dronacharya and tell him that, you know, Ashwatthama is dead, because Krishna knew that if Dronacharya hears that his son died on the battlefield, he won't even be motivated to fight anymore. And then if we get Dronacharya out of the game, then, you know, it's a big victory for us. You know, if we can kill Drona, then, you know, we'll get a lot of progress in this whole thing. But Yudhishthira's like, how can I possibly lie? You know, and this is my guru. You know, he's the one that taught me everything I know about the military arts. How can I lie to him? But it just so happened that one of the elephants on the battlefield was also named Ashwatthama. And Krishna's like, well, just tell him, see, Ashwatthama did die. The elephant, just go tell him that Ashwatthama died. And then even then, Yudhishthira was really conflicted about this whole thing. And he was considering not doing it because he didn't want to lie. He didn't tell a lie his whole life. But then eventually, because he was surrendered to Krishna, and at the end of the day, he knew this principle of, what is that? Dharma swanushtita pungsang vishvaksena katasviyaha notpada yadyadiratim shrama evahi kevalam. That any so-called dharma, if it doesn't produce some kind of attachment for hearing about the pastimes of Krishna, for serving Krishna, then it's just considered to be useless labor. So he knew this higher principle. And he went and did it, but even still, he was like, Drona, your son Ashwatthama died, or I guess he didn't say your son, but Drona, Ashwatthama died, and then under his breath, the elephant. It's he still couldn't really quite fully do it. He just couldn't lie. But so this is the nature of Yudhishthira, and this is actually what really kind of qualified him to be the king of the whole world, and this is why Krishna. I was thinking about we were discussing these I asked in one of your classes why, if Krishna's the Supreme Lord, why didn't he just become the ruler of the whole world and just establish everything himself? But he had a whole plan. And Maharaj said that actually Krishna's family lineage was cursed, that they wouldn't be able to do that. But also Krishna, he wanted these specific people and their line to rule the planet, at least for a certain amount of time. And and Yudhishthira was completely qualified for the job. He was completely capable for the whole thing. But and of course, in the purport, we're hearing that this is because Lord Krishna and Arjuna were like his arms. They were always there. And the arms are, if you think about it, of course, the legs, they're really important because they kind of carry us and everything. But, without arms, it's you can't really do anything. At least without legs, you can eat, and you can you can grab stuff. But arms are really, really important. And in terms of the universal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the arms are the Kshatriyas, right? They're the ones that kind of get things done. They establish Dharma by cutting out irreligion and performing work which is very valuable for society. And they do so much work. They develop huge cities, and so similarly with Arjuna and Krishna acting as the arms. And then it's not just an analogy. Prabhupada literally writes, what is it? In the text, it says that as if they were his own arms, but then, where is it? Anyways, I guess I'm forgetting. But it's obviously the Krishna and Arjuna were so important to and so pivotal and so instrumental in the whole, in Yudhishthira's being established on the throne again. And of course, everyone was on the Pandava's side. They were very instrumental in this whole thing. Bhima, he wiped out literally all of Duryodhana and all of his brothers, who were all Maharathis, super big warriors and everything like that. But specifically because Arjuna and Krishna were there, then all this opulence, all this, the Dharma, everything was there. And of course, we are reminded of the final verse of the Bhagavad Gita, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishno, Yatra Partho Dhanordaraha, Tatra Shrir Vijayo Bhutir Dhruvani Tirmatir Mama. So Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna. So where there is Krishna, Yatra Partho Dhanurdraha. What does Partha mean? Yeah, that's Arjuna. Specifically the son of Priti. And we also learned that it's one who never misses his target. That's another meaning of the word Partha. Yatra Partho Dhanurdara, so the wielder of the bow. Wherever these two people are there, Tatra, there, Tatra Shri, there's opulence. Shri Vijayo, there's victory. Bhutir, there's immense strength and power. Dhruva Nitir Matirmama. Dhruva.
Morality.
No, Nity's
Nitir would be morality. I don't remember.
Dhruva's certain.
Oh, it's like certainly that will, okay. Dhruva Nitir Matirmama. What does Matirmama mean? That's my opinion.
Yeah.
And whose opinion is this? Does anybody remember?
Sanjaya.
That's right, Sanjaya. He observed, so if you remember in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, Dhritarashtra Uvacha, Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre Samavita Yutsavaha, Mamaka Pandavas Chaiva, Samme Yukta, no, what is it? Kimakurvata Sanjaya. So he's asking Sanjaya, all the soldiers assembled in this battle, in this battlefield, Kurukshetra, Dharma Kshetra, what did they do? And he really wanted to, what he was really asking, the connotation of this question was, who's gonna win? The battle hasn't happened yet, but Dhritarashtra, his advisor Sanjaya, he's asking his advisor, who do you think is gonna, come out on top? And Sanjaya put up a few good arguments, on our side we have these great fighters. On their side, they have a few great fighters, but they're really outnumbered. And then he narrated this whole conversation with Arjuna and Krishna, and then by the end of that, he's like, yeah, they got it in the bag. Krishna and Arjuna, just having them there alone, we're finished. That's it. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna Yatra Partho Dhanurdara. So this is why Maharaj Yudhishthir was so qualified to rule the world, is because he was intimately associated with Arjuna and Krishna. And Arjuna is Krishna's most intimate friend, at least Vasudeva Krishna, in his pastimes of ruling and his Kshatriya pastimes and everything like that. And also, we understand that Arjuna and Krishna are incarnation of Narayana, Rishis, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his topmost devotee. The ultimate, the conclusion of all these things, and the conclusion of all of these very complex stories of the Mahabharata is meant to show us that for those who remain chaste to following the instructions of Krishna, they're never conquered. What is that? Declare boldly, Konte Prajanihi Nami Bhakta Pranashyati. Declare boldly that my devotee will never perish. And it seems like they perish sometimes, like they get exiled, And actually, Yudhishthir poses this question to Krishna at the end of the Krishna book, right? I haven't gotten there yet, but that whole section, the liberation or the liberation of Lord Shiva, or something like that. Liberation of Lord Shiva, where the whole story of the not Narakasura, the Vritrasura, who could touch the head and destroy anybody's head. That whole story was told because Yudhishthir approached Krishna and said, what's up with this? The devotees of Lord Shiva, they're always super opulent and powerful. Whereas us, and devotees of you, devotees of Krishna, we're always suffering, it's we're always poor, why is this? You're supreme, we know you're supreme. Why, and Krishna, he presents a lot of good reasons why. There's the famous verse that Prabhupada would often quote where, does anybody know that verse? Yasyaham anugrihnami. Yeah, anyway, I don't know. But
first installment of my mercy. I take away all
yeah. For one who I'm extremely, who I really care about, I take away all of their material attachments. They might not even be attached to it, but still he'll take it away just to show that the devotee, he doesn't need any of these things to really be happy, And so Krishna explains this to him. He also explains this whole narration of the, Lord Shiva and Vritrasura. But ultimately at the end of the day, the devotees of Krishna are always on top. It might seem like they are going through some rough times. It might seem like, I remember one of my first impressions of Krishna consciousness was going to this temple, and all of the devotees there were driving beat up cars and on food stamps, and the temple was falling apart and everything. And I'm like, man, am I really gonna give up like a nice college education and like you know, I got my whole life kind of chalked out and like I can make a lot of money and like, you know, do I really want to be like that? But then you start talking to them, they're all like really humble and peaceful and happy people, and also you'll meet many great devotees who have everything, all the material things that they need. And this is because their consciousness is that anything given to them is the mercy of the Lord and should be used in the service of the Lord. And this was, Yudhishthira was the embodiment of this principle. And whenever Yudhishthira was on the throne, the earth, Bhumi Devi, gave everything. I think it's in the first canto, right before Krishna was leaving Hastinapur, right before Kunti's prayers, I think. I don't really remember it so well. But this whole description of after Yudhishthira was throned, you know, there was no shortage of rainfall, there was no shortage of like jewels and grains, and the weather was even good, and you know, and there was nothing wrong in the whole kingdom. And this is because, so Bhumi Devi is an expansion of Lakshmi, Bhu Devi, so you have Shri, Bhu, Neela, but this Bhu Devi is not different from Lakshmi. And whenever the inhabitants of this planet are nicely serving Krishna, the administrators of the world, they're establishing Krishna as being the only object of all of one's activities. Whenever this is going on, then the earth becomes so prosperous, you know, everything on earth becomes so prosperous that, you know, there's no shortage of food. Even like the people in the kingdom are always just very happy. There's no case of anyone's children dying before they die. When even in Dwaraka that happened, right? This whole story where Arjuna and Krishna, they went all the way to go see Mahavishnu. You know, so even that happened with Krishna and Balaram. Then of course they were showing that, you know, they were ultimately glorifying their devotee. After Yudhishthira was enthroned, none of these things they could never happen on this planet after Yudhishthira was enthroned. And then Yudhishthira's subsequent, you know, the next people in line from him, which came to Parikshit Maharaj. He was also coming from that line. But so yeah, I mean, obviously so much more can be said. I'm already I went a little over time. But yeah, whenever you start talking about Mahabharata, you open up you can't say you open up a can of worms, because that means that it's bad, but you know, you really you know, it's kind of like Pandora's box, except it's only good things come out of it. And the more you unravel it, and the more you actually see you ultimately start to see how you yourself are related with the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You actually see how everything is going on under Krishna's direct supervision. And this is the important thing about understanding all of these things. We find so many connections while we're reading the Bhagavatam. Different names will come up. Oh yeah, I remember that's that person. And then it'll tie all the way up into your own life in the present. And you can, in this way you can participate in Lord Krishna's pastimes by hearing them, by serving Krishna and executing his mission and everything like that. So, sorry for going over time. Does anybody have any questions or corrections? I made a lot of mistakes in that because it's so much. Yes, Prabhu.
With the pastime analogies, the way I heard it was that he was uncomfortable to tell a lie. So I think Krishna got him to agree to just say, Ashvatthama is dead. Be he man or elephant, I do not know. So he called out, Ashvatthama is dead. And just as he started to say, be he man or elephant, I don't know, they blew the conch shells. You know, so they kind of blur the rest of the thing. So all that Brahmacharya here was, Ashvatthama is dead. He didn't hear the be man or elephant, I don't know. And he got very depressed. He just sat down on the battlefield. And then that's when Drushtadumna came and chopped off his head. I read something interesting in a book by Sariputta Prabhu. It's called Alien Identities. At one point in the book, he's talking, I can't remember exactly how we got into it, but he mentions in the Mahabharata, there's a description of how, the demigods and the demons are always fighting, right? And at one point, the asuras were defeated by the demigods, and there's a particular brand or group of asuras called the Kalakaya Danavas or something. So they decided that, okay, well, we're getting kicked out of we're losing all over the place up here, so we're going to go take over the earth, which we'll be able to easily do. And the way they did that was they took birth in the wombs of the kings and queens, and that's why in the beginning the Krishna says once the earth was overrun by the unnecessary defense force of that's how it happened. So all these demons took birth in the wombs of the wives of the kings, and they took over the kingdoms like that. So this was in response to that. So it's kind of like it's sort of like a war between the demons and the demigods enacted on earth. Krishna, in response to that, he arranged for Bhima to take birth, from the son of the wind god, and etc. The Pandavas, but they were sons of demigods, and so it was like that war between the demons and the demigods was being continued. And the Battle of Kurukshetra was something that. He also mentions that the birth of Duryodhana was engineered by I can't remember some particular race of Danavas, and there's a pastime where how's it go? Oh yeah, it's a pastime where while they were in exile, the Kauravas were going on some sort of military excursion or whatever they were doing, and they entered into this territory which was protected by the Gandharvas, and they were kind of like, stay out of here, but they kind of wanted to. Anyway, they were captured. There was a fight, and they were captured. Duryodhana was captured by the Gandharvas, and word got out that Duryodhana is, being held captive by the Gandharvas. Got to the Pandavas, who were in exile, and so Bhima, was delighted. He was in ecstasy. Good. Anyway, but Yudhishthira said, no. We have to help him. Like that. So they went. I think Arjuna was sent to because he's the son of Indra, who's the king of the Gandharvas are Upadevas basically. So Arjuna went and said, hey, could you chill, let him go? He's kind of a relative, and blah, blah, blah. So they, on request of Arjuna, they kind of released him. But Duryodhana, they might have killed him, who knows, But Duryodhana was totally humiliated by that. Have you ever heard this before?
Yeah.
Okay, he was totally humiliated by that, and he got, that he was rescued by one of the Pandavas, the very people he had in exile, and he was trying to, do everything he possibly could to destroy them. And so he became very depressed. He went into the whole depression, and I don't know if he was contemplating suicide or not. I can't remember that detail. But what happened was these the demons who had engineered his birth, they sent a messenger to get him, and in a mystic way, they kind of took him out of this dimension. He was before them, and they explained to him that, we've engineered your birth. He was committing suicide because they had to talk him out of it. They said, hey, no. We've engineered your birth. This is all arranged by us. Don't worry. You just go back there, and you're going to everything's going to be fine. We're going to, befuddle the Pandavas and all the members of the, that dynasty, and you're going to win. Anyway, so when the messenger brought him back to the same spot, and when he came out of the trance or whatever, he thought, I'm going to kill the Pandavas, and he was just totally determined again, Anyway, that's as much as I remember, but it's pretty far out.
Yeah, in the Mahabharata, it's described how the whole entire Kaurava forces were especially at the time of the battle, they would become possessed by these lower these evil entities. It was really scary, and their weapons, they would get these weapons, the Naga, I forget what it was called. Yeah, Nagapashu is really, really powerful weapons in the mode of ignorance. They were getting empowered by this mode of ignorance, and it still was nothing compared to Arjuna and Krishna.
That's what was described. And these demons, whoever they were, they described that even they were going to befuddle the minds of Bhishma and Drona, because in their right mind they couldn't do it. So they were going to influence the whole thing, and they were thinking that that as a result of this they'll come out victorious. But of course Krishna got involved, and as you pointed out, they're no match for Krishna. Krishna, and they got over.
Yeah, there was a really close call with that the Naga weapon. Krishna actually saved Arjuna indirectly. It wasn't fighting or anything like that, but while he was driving the chariot, this like snake arrow was coming right for Arjuna, and Krishna like somehow or other like dug the chariot like into the ground, and it like pushed up like the earth, and like somehow like avoided this like whole weapon. Anyways, there's so many things like that in there. Krishna was arranging everything the whole time. Yeah, power of the forces of good and evil. That's kind of the theme of like even like mundane like stories and everything like that. I was also thinking in this instance when the Pandavas saved Duryodhana, so many demons, specifically coming to mind like Ravana. He was a huge demon, but throughout his life he got humiliated so many times. He was defeated by Kartavirya Arjuna. He lost a fight with Yamaraj. He lost so many fights along the way, and still.
Was it a fight with Yamaraj? No? You sure?
I'm not sure. I know he got kicked by Vamana at one point. For some reason, it's coming to my mind.
Hanuman burnt down.
Hanuman, yeah, kind of like.
In the fight with Yamaraj, he was fighting with him, and Yamaraj, it was kind of, it was a fight, but Yamaraj was ready to use his dunda something, I can't remember what it's called. Yamaraj has a weapon, something, dunda something, I can't remember what it's called. But he was going to use that, which is like, that would have been finished Brahma. Then Lord Brahma came and said, hey,
we got a plan for him.
You can't do that, I gave him a benediction.
Oh, yeah.
And Yamaraj had to cooperate with Lord Brahma. So he held off and restrained himself. That's what I think about it.
But yeah, even despite so much humiliation, they always think that they can come out on top. Anybody else have anything?
Just a couple of things. So one thing I heard in a class like 4 years ago that Bhakti-Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur gives one understanding of all the difficulties that the Pandavas went through. It's to discourage insincere people from taking to the path of Krishna consciousness for like material gain. It's kind of like something interesting. Another thing also is, as far as I heard a different, account of Parashar Muni, like impregnating Satyavati. My understanding was that like he was on the boat with her, and he's like the guru of astrology. So like he understood at that particular time that to give birth to a child or engage would give birth to a great personality. And so he's on that boat with her. He said, "This is like a situation, and like if we do this, and then they will give birth to a great personality." He could like understand that. That was my understanding.
Yeah, you're probably right. What I read is just like a premarital union, and of course we think that that's bad, but obviously Parashara Muni is like a great personality, and he would not be expected to do something very simple. I figured there would be some kind of explanation for it.
I mean, that is also there with the demigods. There is instance of they're demigods, but they're doing things like out of character.
Yeah, Indra is really notorious for doing stuff like that.
Indra, and also Chandra, also in the Bhagavatam, that's there. Anyways, but those things that was my understanding of that. And then just a comment also, but it's interesting, if there's whenever some commentary comes out explaining some of these intricacies of the Mahabharata, just for instance, why Pandu, he knew he was going to die, why he did that, and then why Yudhishthira gambled all those things away, going on that street. Because and then also there's that example, we see in the Bhagavatam, for instance, with Mara Parikshit, garland, putting that snake garland around the Rishi, that was the pastime of the Lords of the Bhagavatam could be spoken, and then also in the, Ramayana, so many things are there, I'm reading through that commentary now, and they're explaining that, Lord Ramachandra was cursed, not cursed, but he was banished to go to the forest because Ravana had to be killed, and that was the whole reason why. That whole boon thing was there, but Kaikeyi was inspired by the demigods to think that way and then give that ask for that particular boon. And so that was they give an example of that. That's the whole thing going there. And specifically, he was cursed for 14 years because that's exactly how long Ravana had to live. 12 years, it wouldn't have solved the point because as long as Ram was in Ayodhya, he wasn't going to kill Ravana. And if it was 16 years, then it would just been wasting time for 2 years in the forest. So anyways, they try to give that. So it'd be interesting to someday understand all these intricacies of what was Krishna's plan behind all these different things.
It was the same as his. He wasn't brief. It was just like he covered them.
Oh, where'd you hear that?
Maharaj class.
Uh,
It was like it was already like the must in the air, and then like he was like, yeah, astrology, like this is like the right time to do it. So he just covered them.
don't try to imitate that. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki
Jai.
jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.